Hello, BookTube. I thought we'd continue with our library tour now that we're starting a new week. I've got the bean here, up on my shoulder. Uh, we sometimes walk around the place like that, just so that she can see the world from a higher vantage point. But we're continuing with our library tour here in the darkest depths of Mordor. This little built-in shelves section here that I have just piled with books. And we're doing the top shelf, and the top shelf I have piled with mass-market paperbacks. So even though it's been, this is the 6th video of Mordor, it's still been a huge number of books. And that's just going to continue. We've got lots more mass-markets to go until we're done with this shelf. So let's just continue. This first one is the Superman story. It was not originally published as a book. It was originally published as Action Comics number 500, with a story by Martin Pascoe and art by the great Kurt Swan. And they took the full-color Action Comics number 500 and broke it up a couple of panels per page to make a book. Something has been activating my allergies in the last day. My surly houseboy says that it might be ragweed. I think he made that up, one way or another. Action Comics number 500 was a sort of big retelling of Superman's whole story, not just his origin, rocketed to the planet Earth from the doomed planet Krypton, powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal man, but also everything else. The arrival of Krypto, the superdog, his upbringing by the Kents, his getting to know all of his friends and moving to Metropolis to fight crime. The large chunk of that issue was telling the Superman story, which is the title of this book. And the other chunk of the issue was a fiendish plot hatched by Lex Luthor. And I loved the issue. I thought it was fantastic. And I was happy when it came out as a book, because I have read it so many times. It is really not going to hold up forever. And this is a little bit more durable. I have a small library of Superman books, and this is one of them, although they're not all together, so I don't know why I call them a library. That's not good. Let's see here. Okay. All right. This is by Gordon Merrick. We may have seen this before. This is, when did this come out? 1970. Oh my God. This is The Lord Won't Mind, in which two very attractive and very confident and hugely endowed teenage boys meet, fall in love, fall in lust, and it's just their story. This is them as young men. The story took off. It resonated with gay readers in 1970 and the 1970s because there was nothing else like this. You could go to a shop at certain points in the Lower East Side in New York, and the shop wouldn't have a name on the door, and no one in the shop would look at each other. But there would be books, but that had gay protagonists, but they wouldn't be like this. They were horribly self-hating and full of sadomasochism and porn and whatnot. Whereas this, Gordon Merrick was trying something completely different. He was trying to tell almost a fantasy story of what it would be like in a pure, sunlit world where everyone is beautiful and everyone is accepting, and young gay men who happen to fall in love with each other face no obstacles of a social kind. And the amazing thing about these books is, because this wasn't the only one, Gordon Merrick wrote a whole bunch of books, including further adventures of these two characters as they get older. And the amazing thing about them is that they were always sold in bookstores, normal bookstores, right alongside Tom Clancy and Joan Collins and Jackie Collins. Kind of amazing. And as a period piece, these things make very good reading. I don't know that they help the cause of gay rights or gay liberation at all, but I'm not sure they wanted to either. But I will say this: I'm not going to. I don't think there's much Gordon Merrick up here. I will say this: that if you are a gay reader in the 21st century, especially if you were born in the 21st century, so that so that you think that James Bond, the movie multi-billion-dollar franchise character James Bond, not suddenly being made gay is oppression. I have heard 21st century gay people say that very thing. That because the owners, the studio and the literary estate that owns James Bond, a multi-billion-dollar property marketed all over the world, including countries where homosexual people are hunted for sport, that because that company has not agreed to make James Bond gay, gays are being oppressed. If you're a gay person in the 21st century, then A, you're going to call that oppression, and B, you're going to be so full of idiotic, brainless, braying entitlement that you don't even acknowledge that time before your birth existed, much less that it involved real people or had any real effect on anything. But once upon a time in this country, gays faced real oppression, not a steadfast, refusal on the part of Marvel Studios to make Captain America gay and give him a boyfriend, but real oppression where they could be, beaten, curb stomped, that sort of thing. And so to that demographic especially, I will say, you ought to read a Gordon Merrick novel. I'm not saying make a habit of it, but find one. The Lord Won't Mind is a perfect example. Find that and read it. Same thing also applies to the actual classics of pre- and Stonewall era gay fiction, like, for instance, Dancer from the Dance. You should read these books. But nevertheless, you should read them, but if you're me, I'm not sure that you should still own them. I don't know what half these books are doing on this shelf. Okay, this next one is a Tarzan novel, far away from the other Tarzan novels. This is Tarzan and the Golden Lion. That is a Boris Vallejo cover. This camera is not going to do the anatomy justice. That is quite the cover. And it's just another Tarzan adventure, so I don't... Okay, here's another free-floating Edgar Rice Burroughs. This is Thuvia Maid of Mars, another copy of Thuvia Maid of Mars. I think we've seen 3 now. This is just an Edgar Rice Burroughs adventure. I really, really like it. I do not need 3 copies. Okay, these next 2 are mass market paperbacks from, who was this? Who did this? Yeah, the Perennial Mystery Library of Harper and Row, back when HarperCollins was Harper and Row. And these have covers by Marie Michal, and these are Dorothy Sayers' Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries. Here are 2 here. There's the 5 Red Herrings and Clouds of Witness. I don't think, off the top of my head, I don't think I have any of the others in this series with these great Art Deco cover illustrations that I love so much. This is the best issuing of the Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries, I think, that's ever been done. Same thing as these are the best issuings of John Carter and Tarzan, these mass market paperbacks that look just like this. So I should have all of these. Because if I'm ever going to feel like reading a Lord Peter Wimsey mystery, which doesn't happen that often, but if I do, I'm going to want to read it in this format. They are incredible. Again, this is just a recommendation library tour. If you haven't read a Lord Peter Wimsey mystery, you should try it, and you will probably go in expecting a certain number of things, and you won't get a lot of those things, and you'll get something much stranger. So worth your while to explore. Okay, we have science fiction now. This is Gordon Dixon, science fiction writer Gordon Dixon, who was prolific, wrote a whole bunch of really top-notch military science fiction short stories. And then in a couple of novels, he invented a future world in which Earth and a few nearby worlds have been colonized, and there's an interplanetary commerce system. And one of those planets is a planet called Dorsai, and it's a rocky, inhospitable world, and the only thing of value that its inhabitants have to export to other worlds in exchange for goods and services is themselves. They on Dorsai, the men and women are trained to such a proficiency of military thinking, physical perfection, that they actually can hire out as mercenaries and masters of war for less military planets, and so they do. And you got a book called Dorsai and Tactics and Mistake and whatnot, and the concept caught on. It was the only one of Gordon Dixon's concepts that ever caught on. He tried real hard. He threw lots of concepts at the barn door. This is the only one that caught on, and he went with it. he started writing D'Orsay novels, and a lot of them were very good, and then he lost his way and started writing 1,100-page D'Orsay novels and coming up with a grand unified theme to unite not only his D'Orsay novels, but everything else that's ever been written by any human being in any culture since the dawn of time. And that paralyzes a writer, and it certainly wards off readers, and that's exactly what happened to the child cycle of Gordon Dixon. It's a terrible shame, because if he'd stuck to his guns, if he'd remembered where he came from and just continued to write really enjoyable military science fiction novels, the series could be a classic. There could be, a dozen books in the series that are all classics, but instead, that didn't happen. But fortunately, we got some classics before he went off the rails. And one of them is this one, Lost D'Orsay, from 1980. It's a heavily illustrated mass market paperback. Another perfect reason why you would never get rid of something like this, because no one's ever going to do this again. And this is a novel about a man from the D'Orsay who is not military. He's a musician. He rejects the one and only reason for being that D'Orsay people have. And it's his story and his adventure, and it's really good. Really, really enjoyable. One of the probably 3 genuinely good D'Orsay novels, and this is one of them. So I'm glad I have it, especially in the illustrated version. I don't know that there's ever been not an illustrated version. Has anybody ever bothered to reprint Lost D'Orsay? I don't think so. But if they did, I don't think they would have the rights to the illustrations. I think they'd just print the text. Okay. All right, this is a Rand McNally guide to Boston and its environs. 25 cents. That is the State House on the cover that I know very well. I know every inch, every corner, every cranny, every sub-basement in the State House. When was this thing made? When? When was this made? Okay, this was made in 1898. So it tells you all about Boston and Dorchester and Jamaica Plain and Roslindale and the sites of Boston Common and the Public Garden and obviously it belongs on good Lord. It belongs on my is there going to be a picture of the Boston Public Library? I can't remember. There is. That is a picture of the oh no, that's the Law Library of Harvard College. Okay, so are we going to get a picture of the Boston Public Library? Maybe not. Oh, you could do it. Yes, there is. Okay. That is the Boston Public Library. You notice the streetcar, the trolley car, and you notice also the wide open spaces. That picture is not possible today. This is the Boston Public Library, and it's on Tremont Street. And right now, today, you can't even see this because it is connected to a big modern monstrosity addition to the library. And I kept this. It really belongs on a shelf with all my other Boston books. And by shelf, I mean an actual shelf. So what I really need to do with these library tours is reorganize my library so that stuff is together, so that I can find it when I want it. All the Boston books should be together. All the history books should be together. Whether they're mass market, trade paperback, or hardcover, they should all be together. All the science fiction should be together. I mean, I'm not that much of an organized person, but at least I could do that. Okay, this is the Pelican History of England. This next one, this is by David Thompson. This is England in the 20th century. There you have, as he was then, the Prince of Wales with a dog and a jaunty cap. Posing for one of the many publicity paintings and illustrations that he posed for when he was the most popular royal in the world. When the whole of the country, the whole of the Commonwealth, the whole of the empire looked forward in the back of their mind to the day, long be it distant, when the king would die and this incredibly popular young man would become king. No one guessing that he would abdicate. What British king had abdicated. But we've talked about these kinds of things before, something like the Pelican History of England or the Fontana History of Royal Houses of England, where the author gets a brief. The author is told, like David Thompson would be told, we're looking at you to write a short beginner's walkthrough of 20th century history up to, I think, 1950 or whenever this stops. It was extremely cheeky. For this to title itself England in the 20th century, when the 20th century was barely half over when it was written. But the publisher would go to someone like David Thompson and say, we'd like you to write this book. And the person, be it David Thompson or anybody else, has two choices. One choice that is not on the table is to say no. You must not say no to an editor coming to you with a fistful of money. Even if it's a small amount of money, it's enough for your mortgage for that month. They have two choices. They can either say yes and then phone it in, what we now call phoning it in, or they can say yes and write something smart and idiosyncratic, something that technically fits the bill of an introduction to the major names and places, but that is really the author's walkthrough of the time. And this is that. This is the latter, and to a wonderful degree. Just wonderful. When you get books like in series like this, these old gems that are now gone and are never coming back, if you find a gem like that, you'll underline something on every page. I did. Just amazing. Okay, all right. This is a historical novel by Robert DeMaria. This is Claudia. This is a historical novel about, among other people, Catullus. This is a very tricky thing to write a historical novel about the Roman poet Catullus. We know nothing about him. But one thing that, at least in his poetry, we can sort of infer, it's probably not true in a literal sense, but is his connection to Claudia, who was Claudia, a member of a noble family who her brother. This video will go on a very long time. I have to explain Roman electoral politics, but you had two types of people at the top rungs of Roman society in the late age of the Republic, and one type could hold some public offices but not others, and vice versa. It was sort of roughly analogous to the House of Commons and the House of Lords in England, and her brother was an extremely ambitious POS who decided that although he was a member of the Claudius family, that he would change to, that he would go from what the patrician line that the Claudians had always been, to the plebeian line, which would give him political opportunities that he couldn't have under the old constitutions, under the old laws, with his. It's extremely Byzantine. It was to the Romans as well. The way that he had to do it was to change his name and get himself adopted into the family of someone on the other side of the political aisle. So it's weird to think of her as Claudia when her name was Claudia, but nevertheless, she was a Roman siren, a Roman tempter. She appears in the literature of the day, and she is a centerpiece of some of Catullus's poetry. That absolutely does not mean that he ever knew her, that he ever had anything to do with her. She was a public figure. If I were to write a long and scandalous ode to Taylor Swift today, in 2,000 years, no one would be justified in saying that therefore she and I were lovers. But nevertheless, this is a terrific novel. And again, like so many things that are on this Mordor library tour, I don't see this ever coming back. I don't see anyone ever bothering to even find out if anybody owns the rights to this thing. It's just, to most people, it's just one historical novel among billions. Why bother? But it's actually really good. One of the better Roman historical novels that I've ever read. And I was a tough judge of it because I'm very, very fond of the poetry of Catullus. Okay, all right. This is a mass market commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Saturday Review, which I believe is gone. I believe the Saturday Review is gone. No one would ever print a book like this. This is just a collection of essays from the Saturday Review's history, and some of them are better than others. And it's just, for me, it's just catnip. Just an amazing thing to tour through. I regularly take this off the shelf and reread it because it's just so much fun. All about a literary world that was totally alive, jumping with life, and now gone. Now I'm not remembered in any way except in these essays and the memoirs of the people involved. Okay, then we have a little golden book. This is we've seen a lot of these before. This is a terrific one. This is the Golden Guide to the Everglades, and it's these little pocket-sized things that are full of illustrations to help you identify animals, and also to help you identify terrain. And this is just one of their regional guides. They did a whole bunch of general guides. We saw, I think, the one for birds, the Golden Guide for birds, or maybe bats. In my time, I've had multiple copies of all of these, including all of the regional guides, because most of the regions I've known and loved. The Florida Everglades, I've known them quite well. I don't love them. They're a pestilential place, but I'm extremely familiar with the Florida Keys. And this is just a little, I have no idea why I still have it. I shouldn't still have it. Like half these things, I shouldn't still have it, but enjoyed it. Okay, didn't we see this already? No, we didn't. Okay. Or did we? Is that what this is? What is this? Yes, it is. Okay, this is a double. We saw this. We saw the Fontana Guide to the Royal Houses of England. This is The Stuarts by J.P. Kenyon. And I said the same thing about it that I said about the England in the 20th century, which is just that if you get a good author who knows the subject, they're going to toss off one-liners as opposed to writing an encyclopedia entry, and I have just a double of that. So those should be together, and also I shouldn't have a double. Okay. All right, then we have a novel. Boy, this is all over the map today. Sorry about that. We have a novel. This is by Jeremy Levin. This is Satan, His Psychotherapy and Cure, by the unfortunate Dr. Kassler, JSPS, which stands for Just Some Poor Schmuck. A novel in which Satan, through a computer, puts himself on the psychoanalyst couch for Dr. Kassler. And Dr. Kassler, of course, has his life completely destroyed by this experience. It's superb. It's just absolutely superb. Jeremy Levin, before he, as Holden Caulfield would say, before he went and became a whore in Hollywood, he wrote two novels. He wrote Creator, and he wrote Satan. And they are both amazing. They are both just amazingly great American novels. Totally gone. Again, I'm pretty sure they'll never be brought back, but worth your time to find. Very much worth your time to find. Creator is probably up here somewhere, but Creator and Satan by Jeremy Levin are books that you maybe haven't heard of unless you've heard of them on this channel, and they are well worth your time. They are funny, they are heart-wrenching, and there are huge set pieces in them that you will remember forever. They deliver on every level for a novel. So again, all the fiction should be together, but we won't harp on that. Okay. All right, we're going to wrap up this batch with Keith Armour, old-style C-list science fiction fantasy writer who wrote, again, like Gordon Dixon, he hit on something that resonated with his fans. He hit on something. Keith Armour and Gordon Dixon actually teamed up a few times, including a short story called Call Him Lord that is amazing. It is amazingly good. The short story Call Him Lord is amazing. But they didn't always. These old hacks, they went wherever the money was, and they wrote all the time. They wrote constantly. And you can't be at the top of your game if you write all the time. So if you're really talented, fallow periods are good for you. And Keith Armour also, like Gordon Dixon, hit on something that his fans really liked. I mean, his fans would have read him write anything. I was a fan of his, and would have, if there was a new Keith Armour short story in some science fiction anthology, I would grab it for that. But he hit on an idea. In the far future, there's an extremely poncy and effeminate diplomatic corps. Effeminate in all the worst ways, in all the flouncy, stereotypical ways, ineffective. And somehow or other, a man named Retief has attached himself to this military corps, to this diplomatic corps, but he is a two-fisted Conan-style troubleshooter. So he's not like any of his mincing bosses at all. He's not like any of his colleagues at all, and he faces the diplomatic challenges of this intergalactic world with all of its gangster aliens and whatnot, with a laser gun and his fists and his wits and a sharp tongue. And the stories have fallen out of favor. I don't think anybody will reprint the Retief stories in the future. Unfortunately, for somewhat justifiable reasons. I mean, Keith Armour, they were a hit and they were popular, and then Keith Armour came under fire from first a bunch of his fellow science fiction writers, and then a younger generation of science fiction writers and readers, who pointed out how insultingly Victorian colonialist his attitudes were towards lots of alien species who talked in a pidgin English and act buffoonishly. I think that he deserves a pass for all of that. I think it's obvious when you read the Retief stories that there's no malice anywhere in them. Not even implied. Not even buried in the author's brain. I don't think there's any malice anywhere in them. I think they're just good fun. But one way or another, I don't think we'll see any Retief reprints anytime soon. And so I hold on to the mass markets that I have because they're all fun. Those short stories are so much fun. And the novels are fun as well. And sometimes, in addition to the short stories being fun and the novels being fun, even the covers are fun. You can count on, once upon a time, you were able to count on the cover artist Rowena for exactly that kind of fun. So this is Retief of the CDC. And that is our hero. And that is his ornate codpiece. I should stress, for those of you who may be considering digging up some Retief at your library or at a yard sale and reading it, that he does not sport a codpiece in the stories. He is not topless in the stories. The publisher just went to Rowena and said, hey, this is about a gun-toting hero in a far distant future, and this is what she came up with. This is an absolutely glorious Rowena cover, but it does not have any connection to Retief of the CDT. Nevertheless, the book is enjoyable from this old Timescape imprint. And that is it. That is, good Lord, that was all over the map. That was our latest Mordor tour, where we have classic science fiction, British history, a 120-year-old guide to Boston, some Edgar Rice Burroughs, a guide to the Everglades. Sorry, Superman. It's all over the place. But at least the theme is mass markets. These are all mass market paperbacks, and that's going to continue. So there are plenty more mass markets to go. So we took the weekend off from the library chores, and we'll do that again. But we will go through. Probably we can finish Mordor, the top shelf, this week. So we'll just plow on tomorrow. So I'll see you then. Thank you, Book 2.